Hey, good morning, everyone. We are from the Antheia projects, and we will have an interview with Lemaistre, who is the natural resources and sustainable business professional who has 10 years of experience in designing, managing, and raising financing for sustainable infrastructure management, climate change mitigation, and the renewable energy projects in Indonesia and the wider ASEAN regions.
Halo, selamat pagi semuanya. Good morning. Oh, thanks.
Before we start the interview session, we would like to introduce ourselves. First, we have the founder of the Antheia projects itself, Buhani. And I'm Puspa and Aksat, which is the representative of the magazine team.
Hi, my name is Akshat Malu, and I'm the Chief Executive of Media here at Antheia.
Hi, I'm Rohani, and I'm one of the co-founders of Antheia.
Okay, first of all, it's an honor to have you here in the interview session, and thank you so much for your time. Before we start the interview, could you please introduce yourself?
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Paul Ahmed. I'm working with an Indonesian company called Arsari Group now. We are headquartered in Jakarta. I personally am living in Singapore. And before COVID, I was coming back and forth between Singapore and Jakarta quite frequently. So the Arsari Group are working in a number of different sectors, including sustainable forest management, different types of circular economy businesses, organic fertilizers, and we're also looking at ways of contributing, let's say, to profitable but also ecologically and socially responsible new industries and businesses, predominantly in Indonesia, but always looking for new partnerships and new opportunities potentially outside of Indonesia. And so my own background is also in, let's say, sustainable financing, public policy. I've previously working in different types of development organizations or NGOs, including some time at the World Bank and also an environmental think tank and a consulting company specializing in forestry and climate change projects. So yeah, I'm very happy to be here and talk about maybe my career journey, and also if there are questions or tips or insights that you're looking for about how to navigate the trajectory of working in sustainability or in climate change projects. I'm very happy to maybe provide some insights. Hopefully they're useful. But yeah, please.
Okay, for the first question, we've been researching on the article that's your educational background. You were a graduate from London School of Economics and Political Science, but now you are focusing on the sustainability things. When and what made you gain an interest in sustainability?
Yeah, that's a good question. So in university and in graduate school, so I went to London School of Economics, LSE, for graduate school. I was studying political science. At the time, I was interested in doing, I did my master's degree and then potentially continuing into a PhD in political science. But I was interested also in getting maybe some work experience. So I left the school. I took a leave of absence, as they call it. And then I started working in public sector and development work. But I think what's important for me is so my mom is Indonesian. I lived also in Jakarta for a long time. And I think I have a very deep emotional connection to Indonesia. So I wanted to work in public sector and development work in Indonesia. And I've always been drawn to nature conservation, about wildlife, but also working on issues of rural development. So working with people outside of the big cities, because for me, growing up, living in Jakarta was really my sense of Indonesia. Right? It was a very kind of Jakarta-centric bubble. So to explore more of the country, to spend more time outside of the big cities, especially Jakarta, I think was a big part of my my growing up and becoming more aware of these issues of poverty and rural development in Indonesia. So I think I combined many of those interests. So let's say from LSE, I combined my interest in politics and public policy, and then I combined my interest of outdoors and hiking and camping and a love of nature. And then I combined my interest of Indonesia. Right? And so I'm thinking about what are impactful career pathways that kind of marry those different interests. And working, I think, in climate change and sustainability is a natural marriage or a natural combination of those different things, right? Especially since Indonesia as an island nation, a low-lying island nation, or many of the islands are low-lying, will be especially vulnerable to long-term climate change. Otherwise, a very poor country, especially in parts of eastern Indonesia. So the resources to combat climate change or combat the effects of climate change are not always apparent. So I saw a real need and opportunity, and I think a good match for me to be able to work in the broader space. And I think it's been a good decision, right, to have left the PhD program and to work more closely on the ground with different types of sustainability and environmental organizations.
I guess our question would be, so you've already told us how you sort of got interested in sustainability and in the environment. So from what we know that you've specialized in sustainable finance.
Right.
So could you tell us more about what that is, and what do you think, what kind of role do you think it will play in the future of the environment and the economy? Like you said, it's a marriage of both. So what do you think how do you think sustainable finance will play a role in the future of both the environment and the economy?
I think and I feel that there's a big kind of attitudinal shift in the world of finance, that where finance organizations, especially ones that kind of operate in the public domain, are becoming more and more aware of the impacts of their financing on environmentally and socially destructive projects. Right? So there's been a big movement in the centers of finance, places like Singapore, London, Paris, New York, that they cannot just lend or distribute money without understanding how that money impacts environmental systems and also what kind of social impacts it has. So I think over the last 10 years, I think there's been this kind of enormous awakening about this. There's been a lot of sustained pressure, and from media organizations, non-governmental organizations, pressuring the financial system to become more responsive and to become more apparent, right? To not just lend or distribute money to organizations that are not responsible in their business practices. In Indonesia, I think the most visible or maybe commonly understood recipients of that might be the big natural resources, palm oil, pulp and paper, monoculture companies that are not responsible in their practices. And I don't mean to say that every palm oil company there is not doing a good job. I think many are looking seriously and really considering how their operations are impacting the world around them. But there are many companies that do not really follow the rules of the game, follow government regulations, or are even cognizant about the impact that they're doing. So, or that they're causing. So the financial sector, I think, plays a very important role in holding to account many of those organizations that are actually working on the ground and potentially contributing to environmental and social degradation, right? So I would say sustainable finance is this kind of this movement. It's this new methodology about attaching different types of environmental and social conditions and requirements in order for companies to access financing. It's going to be an effective tool in order to make companies in the private sector more responsible and more responsive as well.
I think that is a very interesting proposition. Like you said, I think it's a very important emerging trend, just because it's important, like you said, environment, social, and governance. These three factors are super important, and they are definitely factors that every company should consider, ideally, but I think you're right. There is a long way to go. While we're talking about trends, another trend that we've sort of explored a bit is biocommodities, where from our understanding, biocommodities is taking any sort of industrial waste or any sort of biomass, biofuels, bio-waste, and basically processing it in a sustainable manner to give it a second life, to sort of make use of these, of the byproducts of the processing. So our question to you is, could you tell us a bit more about biocommodities, as well as the importance of them in the coming few years?
So Arsari Group are involved in biocommodity production, different types of renewable energy or chemical substitute products. So anything that we might be able to harvest from the natural world, right? From forestry areas and agricultural areas, even urban waste areas, right? How can we reduce waste, either forestry, agriculture, or urban waste? How might we be able to recycle those calories, recycle those proteins, recycle those bioorganisms in ways that are economically valuable, and also help to reduce the amount of waste that we're generating, right? So I'll give you an example of what our Arsari Group are working on in East Kalimantan. We are managing a very large forestry concession that is highly degraded. So in 1999 and 2000, there were these catastrophic fires that swept across East Kalimantan and have degraded larger areas of the forest. And so we as a company are now looking at regenerating this forest in order to help improve carbon sequestration, i.e. how can we improve the area of this land to store carbon and remove it from the atmosphere, and also to make these different types of biocommodities, right? So we are experimenting with making different types of forest biomass energy. So wood chips and wood pellets that might be used as a substitute for coal. We're also looking at organic fertilizers. We're also looking at different types of agroforestry products. So I think these are all things that will increasingly be more and more in demand in Indonesia, the region, and also globally. In Indonesia, I think we have a unique opportunity because of the amount of agriculture and forest land that we have to produce these biocommodities. I think the challenge moving forward is to make sure that the production of these biocommodities doesn't lead to more environmental degradation, right? Just because something is made out of organic waste or waste products doesn't mean it can't also lead to environmental degradation, right? If we don't control the way that we manage the resources, we might find ourselves in another situation similar to how palm oil companies have operated for the last 40 years, where the incentive is just to maximize production of land and forest area, right? And so this is maybe also back to what we were talking about before, where ESG frameworks and other checks and balances can help to prevent the very worst impacts. If, as part of the financing for the production of biocommodities, they say, okay, we're interested in financing operations because we believe that the biocommodity industry is going to be enormously valuable in the future, but you need to put these kind of checks and balances in order to not go kind of unimpeded into different forest areas. I think that's a good thing, right? I think we need to be very aware of what we're doing on the ground. But generally, I think the biocommodity sector is a huge growth area in Indonesia. And I think Indonesia also has a very strong comparative advantage in leveraging that industry.
I think that's very interesting, and there are two reasons I'm saying this. First is, so we've explored carbon capture systems, and I think with the advancement in technology, a lot of people are just thinking about how we can take the technocentric approach, maximize technological efficiency, create these carbon capture systems. But sometimes, in that technological advancement, we forget like the simplest form of carbon capture systems we have are actual forests. And the second thing that I found particularly interesting, like you said, that anything is harmful if it's not done sustainably. So like you said, if the biocommodities are not produced sustainably, if we don't give enough time for the lands and the forests to regenerate naturally and we're just exploiting them, then yes, we will have another environmental catastrophe at our hands, essentially. The next question we have for you has to do with our magazine. So as you know, we are creating a magazine at the Antheia project, and the main theme of that magazine is domestic waste.
Okay.
So we sort of wanted to ask you what your thoughts on domestic waste are, and how do you think we as individuals can tackle the problems domestic waste poses, and how we as a society can tackle the problems that domestic waste poses?
I mean, I first of all, I think that the fact that young people like those involved with Antheia are getting together and making new publications or new platforms to talk about these issues, as people in your late teens or early 20s, I think is fantastic. Right? Like, I didn't see that kind of bottom up mobilization and kind of community action happening to the same degree even 10 or 15 years ago when I was at that age. So I think that's also a good signal of growing environmental and social consciousness and awareness about these big hyper complex issues like climate change and domestic waste that we're tackling, right? So yeah, first of all, my congratulations to all of you for putting these kind of initiatives together, right? Yeah, I mean, on waste, I think like anything, it's an extremely interrelated process and system that requires multiple modes of entry and intervention, right? So through initiatives like Antheia, I imagine that spreading this consciousness of how we can reduce our consumptive behavior. What are the small incremental changes we might be able to do in terms of reducing household plastics, reducing our own individual footprint. What are the small hacks we can do to reuse household materials, to reuse plastics and glassware around the house. Oftentimes, I think that these kind of small actions come into unfair criticism as just being kind of surface level or superficial kind of changes. And I think that's unfair. I think that in so doing, individuals and households understand, right, and just become generally more aware of things that they can do on a daily basis. It's just one of many interventions, right? So on another level up, I think there are lifestyle changes, right, that we might be able to do in terms of how we spend our money. What kinds of foods do we eat? Do we consume as much red meat as possible? Do we look to shift to a more plant-based diet, or maybe lab-grown or plant-based meals. But the point is that there are also changes in how we spend our capital, right? And I think that that's a huge kind of vote, or it's a huge market signal, is how individual households and groups of consumers spend cash. What kind of stores do we patronize? Can we put pressure on restaurant or business groups or supermarket groups in places like Jakarta to switch to more sustainable packaging as part of a broader method to reduce household waste, or the amount of plastics that come into our homes, right? And I think this is also starting to bear fruit in an incremental way with some of the other corporates in Jakarta. Go Food and Grab, I know, have launched initiatives to reduce the amount of plastic cutlery that food vendors provide. Many of the delivery bags are now also from cassava options. So I think the needle is moving, perhaps not as quickly as we would like it to be. And beyond that, I think there's also a lot of really interesting and innovative technology solutions that are showing how we can maybe innovate our way out of this, right? For example, the pervasiveness of cassava or other substitute bags as part of packaging. So I think there's all types of different entry points, especially for young, motivated people to get involved with this. So yeah, I think there's such incredible scope for change, especially in a place like Indonesia, which is one of the world's largest contributors of plastics, unfortunately, to the ocean. So what are the different intervention points, and what are the different entry points, right? You know, maybe one useful exercise that young people can do now is to start making a list or start making an actual map of different interventions to understand the different actors in the ecosystem, right? The plastics company, the restaurants company, the food delivery company, and so on, to understand maybe the pressure points that you can put on these companies in order that they change their ways. Perhaps it's interesting for you to end up working with or for one of these companies, right? Like I was saying before.
Those were amazing points, because I think that's a message that the youth should really take today. There are a ton of people around that aren't very environmentally aware, but I think the small actions they take, if each individual takes small actions, I think can lead to a much larger, much more impactful outcome for the environment. So we've talked about a lot of interesting topics today. We've talked about sustainable finance, we've talked about biocommodities, we've talked about the ESG framework. So the last question we have for you today is that if anyone wants to learn more about these topics, where can they get information about it?
I'll use myself as an example. So I did not come from like an environmental science background. I came from a history and politics background. And what I found very useful for my work now is online courses, right? I've done a lot of free courses on platforms like edX, on Coursera, on Udemy. And I think, one message I like to disseminate to people entering this field is you don't necessarily have to have studied environmental science or management or climate science or whatever, because the challenge of these, or the nature of the challenge of domestic waste or sustainable finance or climate change means that we're going to need all types of different skills available, right? We're going to need people who understand public policy, who understand the science, who understand the economics. We're going to need artists and musicians. We're going to need architects and landscape planners. We're going to need coders, right, to put everything together, because this is a collective effort, right, that has to happen. So one, there's, for almost any subject that you want to learn about today, there are resources online on YouTube or on any of these platforms, these massive open courses. I think that you can also rely on your own passions, on your own interests, your own hobbies because what I'm trying to say is that this is such a multi-dimensional challenge, right? That we can all bring unique skills to the effort, right? To the collective effort. I would suggest also, if there is a topic or a question that you have, I think young people don't feel shy about reaching out on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Instagram, even to say, hey, can I talk to you for 30 minutes? I want to learn about this. So maybe my third major point of advice is just ask. Just ask for 30 minutes of someone's time to have a call and to learn about what they're doing.
I think I would definitely agree with that sentiment. Like you said, in today's day and age, the internet is more important than ever. Networking is more important than ever. And I think just wanting to know, reaching out, and asking can be really important.
Yeah, of course.
So yeah, that brings this interview to an end. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for the information you shared with us. We greatly appreciate your help here at the Antheia project. And thank you from the bottom of our hearts.
Yeah, my pleasure. Good luck. It's an extremely exciting initiative that you guys have. And, if anyone who watches this wants to reach out to me, feel free. I'm pretty easily found on LinkedIn. So yeah, good luck with your endeavors. I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time.
Bye-bye.